Hello everyone, this is going to be my second build presented to everyone. Like the last one, I will have a Google document for reading purposes to kind of give you the summary and everything else. So before I get into this build, I want to talk about the great debate going on in the community. To give you some background, if you look at build guides that are out there, a good chunk of them are going to be katana builds, and that's just because katanas have insane damage potential. Everyone does katanas builds differently, but most of them are going to use Satori. Satori is the one katana that lowers its raw damage in exchange for critical damage. This is one of the many things that I disagree with because you can't guarantee crits 100% of the time. That means the times that you aren't critting, you are reliant on that lower raw damage to finish off a target. At very high difficulties, which is where most of these builds guides come from for katanas, you want to make sure you're dropping targets in at least one shot so you can move on to the next target. The longer you spend on the target, the higher your chance of death is, or finding yourself in a pickle. It's pretty obvious logic, so I don't agree with Satori in the slightest. Even if you could stack the crap out of crit chance, I just still don't agree with it. There's just going to be times where it just doesn't crit. It kind of reminds me of a game called XCOM. In XCOM, and I'm sure people who play this will completely understand this frustration, is there was times where like your, I guess, sniper or infantry had a 96% chance to hit the target and then misses. It's because that 4% says you miss. That's just XCOM and RNG. The same logic applies here. You will always have a chance to not hit the critical with Satori. That's why I have recommended using different katanas for the builds. The next thing that I need to cover regarding this debate is these build guides out there say to rely on the katana. At very hard difficulties, this is going to be really tough to do or too frustrating to accomplish very early on. The only time that katanas really work in the higher difficulties is when you have everything backing it up, such as damage reduction, armor, health, so on and so on. Even if you get to that point, I still feel that it's necessary to have a gun on you of some kind. That way, it's giving you more tools or options in terms of dealing with a particular situation. You can use it to pick off targets before you go in. If you are attacking, let's just say, an organized crime area and has 15 enemies in it, if you're able to pick off at least 5 of those enemies before going in with your katana and they don't notice you, then that's 10 enemies you have to deal with instead of 15, which is a much better odd to deal with than the full 15. Another reason, too, is that, as mentioned in my prior recording, skills do cap at the attribute. So if you have 8 reflex, that means assault, blades, or pistols cannot go beyond 8. So what you can do in the times that you're about to reach that cap is you can start using another weapon. So let's just say I have 8 blades and 8 assault and only 1 pistol. Then I would start leveling pistol. That will, even if I don't use pistols towards the end of the build, it will still give me perk points just for leveling it. Because at 6, you do get plus 1 perk point for pistols. It's a very smart way of handling the build. Okay, so now that we've gotten the debate out of the way, let's go and talk about the weapons. Okay, so I'll start with the gun part. The gun part is up to you. Both of my builds are flexible in terms of how they're handled, which is what I think makes my build a bit better than the other build guides that you'll find out there. It's not picky as to what you do, although there will be certain options that are better than others. So in this particular scenario, you can make a choice of either pistols or revolvers or snipers. I think that pistols and revolvers will give you more versatility. Sure, they won't be as long ranged as the snipers, but it will give you more options. If you're taking the revolver or pistol path, here are the ones that I would look at, and it all depends on your playstyle. Congo, I'm guessing is how you pronounce it, is a good rapid fire option. It also has great recoil control. So if you do want a faster firing pistol, I would certainly recommend that one. Another fast firing option is Apparition. It is a tech pistol, so seeing as you're going to be at 20 tech, you do have the option of Superconductor, which will allow this to ignore armor. The one downfall of this other rapid fire option is it's only available to a Corpo playthrough. So you have to be Corpo to get this pistol. Now for your hard-hitting range pistol/revolvers is going to be either Amnesty, which does a lot of damage and has mod slots, or where is it? It's not Crash, is it? No. It's not Comrade's Hammer. Crap. No, it was Crash, wasn't it? Oh, Archangel, yeah. Sorry, it took me a minute. I derped there. I was trying to remember which revolver it was. It was Archangel. Archangel will give you a ranged electric revolver, which is going to be great for taking out turrets and things like that. But those are really your options when it comes to the revolvers and pistols. If you're going snipers, it's going to be the same as the prior build, but I'll go ahead and mention them real quickly just so you're aware of them. You have the option of 05, which is the explosive tip sniper rifle for more raw damage. Overwatch for the built-in suppressor and faster reload speed than 05. And Breakthrough. Breakthrough is the iconic Nekomata with Ricochet. It can punch through solid objects and then ricochet to other targets near your target. Again, this does require the legendary ballistic compensator, or whatever it's called, the cyberware for it. So that's where you will see like the most of it, because it'll give you 2 ricochets. But that's a very expensive option, so you can also use a normal legendary Nekomata if you want to as well. Those are all of your options for guns. Just like the last build, the katanas will be the same. So you will be using either this katana or cocktail stick. That choice is up to you. Regardless of what you pick, I recommend carrying at least 1 katana or and 2 revolvers, or 2 katanas, 1 revolver. There's certainly a bunch of different ways you can use your 3 loadout slots. It's just, or 3 weapon slots, I should say. It's really up to you. My builds are not very picky about that. Let's go ahead and talk about the stats now. As mentioned in the prior recording, this build is just a swap between body and reflexes. You'll notice that my buzzsaw and sniper build is 1814. This one's 2012, yeah. So you have, instead of 14 reflexes, 12 reflexes, and instead of 18 body, it's now 20. I have a very good reason for this, and also for the using katanas instead of blunt. But we'll get into that in just a second. Let me first explain what's going on here. A lot of people will likely debate with me that going to 20 body is completely useless, and I disagree. There's a good reason for this, especially on a katana build. Under athletics, at 20 body, you will have access to the Indestructible and the Rock perks. Indestructible gives you 10% damage reduction, which will stack with a Cyberware I'll mention in a minute or two. But yes, the Rock makes it so you don't get knocked down, and Indestructible gives you 10% damage reduction on top of armor. Armor by itself is not going to be very good at the higher difficulties. It will certainly keep you alive, but it's not as good as if it were stacked with damage reduction. Damage reduction supported by armor is a great way to be a tank. As blunt versus katana, yes, there is 20 body on here, so you'll be able to level blunt more than katanas, but there's a reason for this. If you'll notice, most of the perks associated with blunt aren't going to be dealing with crit. Your blade perks will deal with crit, so the potential for damage is a lot higher on katanas than blunt, even though that this particular build does not have the reflexes to truly see the most of it. So what I'm saying is, you'll have more damage potential with blades over blunt despite being at a lower attribute, is essentially what I'm saying here. You'll see that once you start playing the game, I assure you. But yeah, so that's kind of your stats and where you want to be. Now I want to show you the Cyberware so you can see what I was talking about. Okay, here we are. So you'll notice under the immune system Cyberware, there is a Cyberware called Pain Editor. Remember just a minute ago that we were looking at Invincible, which says 10% damage reduction. Stacked with this, that's 20% damage reduction in total. Combined with all the armor that you will have under this build, you will find this build to be far tankier than any of the other katana builds that I've seen out there on the internet for build guides. Between this and access to the plus 60% health Cyberware, I'll show you that. You will have a tremendous amount of HP. Notice that the 60% HP skeleton Cyberware requires 20 body. So there's a 10% jump from the other build, because my other build only has 18 strength. Or I'm sorry, 18 body. So you'll notice that it can only get up to purple on this particular thing, but this build, the one we're talking about right now, this one can get all the way up to the legendary version of it for 60% HP. So this build will have 10% more HP from the Cyberware than my other build, in addition to having 10% more damage reduction. This makes this build insanely tanky, and you should be able to survive if you handle things well, even in the very high difficulties. There you have it. There's the build in the nutshell. I will post the Google documents in the description. Thanks for listening.